All right, welcome into the postgame show, everybody. Altitude Sports Radio 92.5. We're reacting to Celtics and Nuggets there in Boston. Weird game. It seems like every Nuggets player had some sort of weird injury in this game. We had Nikola Jokic limping up and down the court. That was a little weird. Jamal Murray was, holding his back there for a while. Julian Strawther went out of this game with an injury. So good game, fun game, exciting game. The Nuggets fall 110 to 103. So the first thing I wanted to get to was Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. They each took one shot in the first quarter. They need to be more aggressive coming out of the gate for the Denver Nuggets. That's, I think, one of the reasons the Nuggets just took so long to get into this game. Weird start time, 11 a.m. Mountain, 1 p.m. Eastern. It's felt like both teams kind of were a little sluggish to start, but the Celtics just got things going earlier. They figured a way to sort of wake up earlier in this basketball game. And, the Nuggets in the second half, I thought, were actually the better team. Great third quarter. Jamal Murray really came alive in that second half, but they just couldn't wake up early enough. I mean, they did mount a comeback effort in this basketball game, but they just took too long to get going in this one. So as always, feel free to leave your comments. I'd like to get to some of those. 2-2 on this 4-game road trip. Not a disastrous road trip by any means. They go 2-2. I mean, if you said the Nuggets are going to go 2-2 on this road trip, probably would have taken that against some very good Eastern Conference teams. They lose to Milwaukee, they lose to Boston, but this was a game that I thought if Michael Porter Jr. and Jamal Murray got going earlier on in this basketball game, the Nuggets had a really good shot to win this thing. Also, there's a picture of Nikola Jokic's arm on Twitter. If you haven't seen it, I mean, it is like pouring blood. How he gets scratched as much as he does is unbelievable to me. There is no other player in the NBA that gets as scratched up as Nikola Jokic does. But kudos to him. He was hurting. This is something that I've talked about a lot, and it's very concerning to me. The Nuggets are really, really banged up right now. And if you're Michael Malone and this coaching staff, I think they've really got to consider shutting some of these guys down for a couple of games, because the schedule is pretty daunting from here on out for the rest of the regular season, just as far as days off goes. They're pretty much now, granted, they'll have 2 days off before they're back home against the Kings on Wednesday. But after that, it's really, game day off, and it kind of goes like that for the rest of the regular season. But I mean, just look at their next 4 games coming up here for the Denver Nuggets. Wednesday, March 5th, like I said. So they get a couple of days off in between, and then they'll play the Kings on Wednesday. Then they've got the Phoenix Suns at home on Friday, and then a very tough back-to-back coming up on Sunday in Oklahoma City, and then Monday in Oklahoma City. So, man, the NBA schedule makers did not make this very easy for Denver. And then after those 2 back-to-back games in Oklahoma City, you've got Minnesota at home and then the Lakers at home. So this is a really tough stretch of the schedule for the Denver Nuggets. And I'm serious, like Julian Strawther, sit him down for a couple of games. I would consider shutting down Jokic for a couple of games. He clearly was limping up and down the court today and just didn't look right. So that's kind of where I'm at right now as far as the Nuggets go in their daunting schedule. But give me your comments. Like I said, I'd like to get to some of those. Kevin says, "Hey, DT, appreciate you listening, Kev." Let's see here. Mr. Pruntrock ruined another national TV loss. Perk is right. No one is concerned with the Nuggets, and teams are salivating to play them. Yeah, Malone kind of said the same thing. I can't remember. I think it was after the Lakers game. He said, nobody's afraid to play us right now, which I was like, wow. But, maybe there's a little bit of truth to what Malone said there. And let's just be honest. This is not the same Denver Nuggets team as a couple of years ago. They're not as deep as they once were. Their bench has been an issue for this team all season long. And maybe Perk has a bit of a point there. I can't believe I'm agreeing with Kendrick Perkins, but but let's not forget, like, the Celtics are the defending NBA champions. They're a very good basketball team. Derek White has just been absolutely incredible for them. He hit some really clutch shots late. He's a great defensive guard, and he's starting to become a prolific offensive scorer. So, but the Nuggets were right there. Like, they had every opportunity to mount a comeback and win this basketball game. They just got going a little bit too late. And like I said, Jamal and MPJ, they have got to get going earlier on in games. They each took one shot in the first quarter. I mean, how does that happen? They can't do that again. So, Jamal had a really nice second half. He ends up with 26 points. He was the leading scorer in this basketball game, 11 of 20 from the field, just 2 of 7 from beyond the arc, but 6 rebounds, 7 assists, and a steal for Jamal. Great second half for him. Christian Brown was excellent again today. Christian Brown played 47 minutes in this basketball game. I don't like that. Now, with Julian Strawther going out, maybe that was the reason Malone played him so many minutes, but 47 of the 48 minutes. Christian Brown took 1 minute off of this game. Again, Jokic plays 39. MPJ plays 40. Jamal plays 40. That concerns me because I feel like the Nuggets ran into this problem last year, and I've talked about this a lot. Has Coach Malone learned a lesson from last season of running these guys into the ground? I mean, look at the bench. Zeke plays 8 minutes. DJ plays 9. Jalen Pickett plays 8. Julian Strawther played 14. He probably would have gotten closer to 20 if he hadn't gotten injured there in the second half. But Coach Malone is stuck between a rock and a hard place. Let's just start there because the bench has been so bad this year. It's like, what's he supposed to do? Are you going to play Zeke Naji 15 to 20 minutes? I don't think so. Are you going to play DeAndre Jordan 15 minutes? Probably not. I do think Jalen Pickett has earned more minutes. In fact, I tweeted that out today that Jalen Pickett should be a regular in that second unit. I think he would be a really good floor general for the second unit. So I would like to see his minutes go up a little bit, take a little bit of the pressure off Jamal Murray from having to play 40 minutes a night like we saw this afternoon in Boston. So that's a player that I think could get more minutes to sort of help spell the starters a little bit. Malone's thinking could have been that they have a couple days off. Like, I get it, but man, it concerns me how many minutes that Coach Malone is playing these guys. And I just don't know if this is going to be sustainable for the rest of the regular season. And the key here is to have this team as healthy and as rested as possible come playoff time. But the good news is the Nuggets are still in the 2 seed in the West. The Lakers are actually in the 3 seed right now. They've overpassed the Memphis Grizzlies, who have lost 2 in a row. They're 4-6 in their last 10. The Lakers are on a 5-game win streak. They're 8-2 in their last 10. I'm telling you right now, the Lakers are going to be a problem. They are. There's no doubt about that. And it would not surprise me at all if they ended up in the NBA Finals this year with Luka and LeBron. Now, I still think Oklahoma City is the favorite to get out of the West, but man, the second favorite right now might be the Los Angeles Lakers, as much as it pains me to say that. Because if you look at the rest of the Western Conference, Memphis is still too young, too early on. I don't believe they're a serious contender to get out of the West. Same with Houston. Really like what they've done in Houston. Good, young, up-and-coming basketball team, but I just think they're still too young and a couple years away. The Clippers are in the 6th seed. I don't think the Clippers scare anybody. And then in the play-in right now, it's Golden State, Sacramento, Minnesota, and Dallas. None of those teams really scare me either as far as being a threat to Denver. But the biggest threat to the Nuggets right now is Oklahoma City and, unfortunately, the Los Angeles Lakers. They have been excellent since the Luka Doncic trade. And, I was wondering how long it was going to take for that to sort of gel. It did not take as long as I thought it would. That was kind of a surprise to me. But again, as always, feel free to leave your comments here. Let's see here. From Ty, 0 free throw attempts for Jokic. That arm, yeah, that is wild. I mean, you saw him alone, standing up for his guy. Gets a tech early in this game. I thought the refs were fine, honestly, for the most part in this game. I thought they let him play for the most part. Now, Boston did take 27 free throws and the Nuggets took 13, but take that for what you will. But Ty makes a good point. Like, it is insane to see how beat up Nikola Jokic gets in the painted area. 0 free throw attempts for Nikola Jokic. Now, I think part of that you have to put on Joker of trying to draw fouls a little bit more often. But, man, I thought the Celtics, for the most part, did a pretty good job defending Nikola Jokic in this game. And Al Horford is still going at, 40 years old? So that was pretty weird to see. I thought Russell Westbrook, obviously, he got in the starting lineup this afternoon with Aaron Gordon being out. I thought Russ was okay. He seems to have he's having problems holding on to the ball right now. And, there was that play late in the fourth quarter where Jokic passes it to Russ in the, below the basket, and he just can't hang on to it. Turnover, Celtics ball. That was a big moment in this game. I thought that the Nuggets had momentum at that point, and really, they could have really cut into the Celtics lead if Russ could have hung on to that basketball and scored there. But he just loses it. They actually initially called it Denver basketball, but then changed it. It was clearly out on Russell Westbrook. So Russ has been kind of hit or miss this season. I definitely think he was better earlier on. He seems to have slowed down just a little bit. Maybe his age is catching up with him just a tiny bit. But I still think Russell Westbrook has been, for the most part, pretty effective for the Denver Nuggets. But this team just needs to get healthy. Like, they look exhausted. They're beat up. Jamal, like I said, was clutching his back, which was kind of interesting. Like, Jamal actually started playing much better after that happened. But they're just beat up. So I really do think the Nuggets need to seriously consider, like, shutting some of these guys down for a game or two. And I know fans aren't going to like to hear that. But what do you want, Nuggets fans? Do you want to see them play every night and ran into the ground and get ousted in the playoffs like we saw last year? Or do you want this team as rested and as healthy as possible for the playoffs? And if that means going down to the 4 or 5 seed, so be it. I know a lot of fans are saying we want home court advantage. And of course, if you can get it, that's ideal. But I just don't think that that's nearly as important as it used to be. Look at what the Timberwolves did to the Denver Nuggets in the Mile High City last year. They were clearly that was the way to go. All right, we got our guy KJ on here who's joining me. KJ, what's up, man?
What's up, Dan? How you doing, my friend?
Doing good. KJ, just initial thoughts on the Nuggets' almost comeback attempt against the Boston Celtics this afternoon.
Listen, the lethargic start by the Nuggets was speared on by their constant 3-point shooting. Like, we understand now that the Nuggets are not a 3-point shooting team. That's something that's understood by the entire league. So if you can collapse the middle and force them to shoot threes early and they don't make them, it usually works out in your favor. There have been a couple of times this year where the Nuggets have come back to win. It just does not work out in the Nuggets' favor. So now, as we're getting ready for the stretch run here, or I guess as we're in the stretch run, should I say, it's up to the Denver Nuggets now to come to the realization that in moments where they want you to shoot threes, how do you slow the game down so much so that even if you have to bait fouls a little bit, because at the end of the day, you can't fall into a trap that's going to lead you down a potential hole that you can't dig yourself out of.
Yeah, and KJ, I brought this up to start the show. Michael Porter Jr. and Jamal Murray each had one shot in the first quarter. Like, to me, that's what really set the Nuggets back. You cannot have two of your better shooters take one shot each in the first quarter. I mean, you just can't have that. And no. I get it. The Celtics are a really good defensive team, and I thought they did a pretty good job on those two guys in the first half. But my goodness, like, who do you think that's on more? Is that the coaching staff's job to get them more open looks earlier on in games? Or is that just Michael and Jamal needing to have the mindset of getting going earlier on in these games?
Well, the truth of the matter is I'm going to put the onus on the players because I think there are just more times where if they see the ball isn't coming their way when Russell Westbrook's on the floor, MPJ and Jamal Murray tend to get a little tentative. They're like, it's like this you got it, bro, energy that comes over them when Russell Westbrook is dominating the ball at times to start off the game. And so instead of them being mature and saying, all right, hey, Russ, hey, if you see me leaking out, bro, hey, look up for me. Hey, man, if you see me cutting towards the basket, hey, don't be afraid to, see if you can needle that pass in there. If you can't needle it, bro, I'll take the fall. It's got to be that constant communication. And we're in game 50 whatever now, and we're still talking about the same thing. So the MPJ and Jamal Murray, they have to get on the same page as Russell Westbrook when he's in that starting lineup. We can't have this. There are going to be games. I haven't been on here in a while, Dan, and we haven't had a chance to get into this, but there is a chance AG will miss games in the playoffs. So this isn't an issue that's going to go away.
Yeah, you're right. And, KJ, something I've been talking about, and we've talked about this before, but I still think it's very relevant. Christian Brown played 47 minutes this afternoon. He took 1 minute off. Joker played how many minutes? I think close to 40, 39. Jamal played 40. MPJ played 40. KJ, this is something I've been concerned with all season long because of how last season ended for the Nuggets. That team ran into the ground. You could just tell. And Malone talked about this in their postseason press conference after the season was over with Josh Kroenke and Calvin Booth. He was asked the question, did you run this team into the ground? He said, maybe I did, and that's something I need to really think about this offseason. So I've been talking about all year. Is Coach Malone going to approach this season differently when it comes to his star players playing these huge minutes? Dude, this team is beat up as they've ever been right now. You saw Jamal go out not go out, but clutching his back, his lower back in the second half of this game. Julian Strawther gets hurt. Nikola Jokic was limping up and down the court the entirety of the game. To me, it doesn't seem like Malone has really changed his tune as far as how many minutes he's playing these guys. How big of a concern is that for you?
I think it's a huge concern because it's the constant thing of Malone asking himself the question when he looks down his bench and he has to figure out, man, who do I want to put in this situation? Like, gosh, I got.
He's in a tough spot because the bench has been so bad. I get it. But
like at some point you gotta trust guys. And so that visual of like when I look down the bench and I see Julian Strawther and I see Russell Westbrook and I see, Zeke Naji and Jalen Pickett and DeAndre Jordan soon to be here within the coming weeks, I would assume, Vlatko Čančar. And so when you look down your bench and that's all you got and you're waiting on Peyton Watson to come back, you're kind of like, what do I do here? So let's say right now this trend continues for the next 2 to 3 weeks. Once Peyton Watson comes back, and if that trend continues where Christian Brown, Jamal Murray, and Nikola Jokic are still playing north of 38 minutes a game during this backstretch here of the season, I'm going to be extremely concerned because it does kind of get to a point, if you're the Denver Nuggets, where you've got to find some trust in some guys. And the only way you can trust them is just put them in situations, man. You got to leave them out there to figure it out because at the end of the day, that's the only way guys build confidence. Julian Strawther, he's going through a little bit of a stretch right now. And so until his confidence comes back as far as him continuing to just shoot, then you can't yank him after 3 to 4 minutes. And I know you don't want the lead to dwindle. I get that. But, man, you just kind of you're not chasing the 1 seed. So you're going to always be right there close to the 2 seed. So I don't understand what's the problem with trusting your guys a little bit right now until you get the rotation that is going to play in the playoffs.
Right. And look, this isn't like, hey, you need to build these guys' confidence for the playoffs because they're not going to be as important in the playoffs. That everybody knows the rotation shrink. I mean, the year the Nuggets won the championship, Malone was basically playing 7 dudes pretty much the majority of the playoffs. My concern is these guys need to build their confidence and play better just so they can give some of the starters some rest here in the regular season so that the starters are ready to go come playoff time. And again, that's, in my opinion, that's what knocked the Nuggets out of the playoffs last year. Those guys were just ran into the ground. So it is very concerning to me to see the massive minutes these guys are playing. Joker's limping up and down the court, and he's playing 40 minutes in this game. Man, that's a tough pill to swallow. And by the way, guess who's right on the Nuggets' heels in the standings right now, KJ?
It's got to be the Memphis Grizzlies and the infamous LA Lakers. It's
the Lakers. They're in the 3 seed. They're a half game back of the Denver Nuggets. I said this earlier before you came on. The 2 biggest threats to the Nuggets getting out of the West this year is OKC and, unfortunately, the Los Angeles Lakers, who, man, that Luka LeBron pairing came together way faster than I suspected it would. But again, like, how concerned should the Nuggets be with playoff seeding versus, like I said this earlier, I don't care if they go down to the 5 or 6 seed. I just don't. Yeah. I'd rather have that happen and this team be rested and as healthy as they possibly can be come playoff time versus trying their darndest to stay in the 2 seed, which is where they're at right now. Now, of course, you want home court advantage. But again, they had home court advantage in last year's playoffs, and they lost three games at home in the second round to Minnesota.
Right.
I just that is what concerns me most right now is how many minutes these guys are playing, and I hope that Malone has that in the back of his mind of like, I need to get these dudes some rest. And I get what you're saying, man. Malone's looking at his bench and he's like, well, what do you want me to do? I get it, but Jalen Pickett, he can play more minutes. He played 8 minutes tonight. He can easily play 15 minutes a night. DeAndre Jordan, 9 minutes. Dario Saric, I mean, it's pretty much over at this point. And that's really kind of what's hurting the Nuggets right now is they brought him in to be the de facto backup center to Nikola Jokic. Clearly, it hasn't worked out. Zeke Naji, he can play more than 8 minutes, right? Like, I do think there is a pathway to not play Christian Brown 47 to 48 minutes. I mean, what are we doing here? What are we doing here, KJ?
Right. No, agree 1,000%. And here's if we're going to be honest here, Jalen Pickett would not have played at any point in this game if Malone wasn't worried about Jamal Murray's foul trouble.
Yeah.
If that wasn't,
and if Julian Strawther doesn't go out, he probably doesn't play either.
Very much so. And so, there's like a lot of little factors there, and there are workarounds Malone can do in moments where, Jokic isn't on the court. Start the transition at I would say start the transition sooner so you can bring the starters back sooner in the second quarter. Because I think he's walking the starters for the most part, outside of Jamal, who he tries to stagger with the second unit. He usually walks his starters right up until about the 2-minute mark-ish of the first quarter. We'll bump that down to about the 4-minute mark. Start bringing 3 starters out, right? And then that way you got 2 starters still in. And then that way the bench can cover a longer stretch in real time. And then that way, once you want to bring your starters back in the second quarter, they'll be fresher and they'll be able to ramp it up a lot more quicker versus, this taking a few minutes to kind of get going. It's little ways he can get it done here in the regular season. We're talking about doing what you need to do to get to the playoffs, man. We're not talking about what you're going to do in the playoffs. We know you haven't revealed that plan yet. We know that. We're not dumb, okay? So it's like, let's just be honest here, man. Like, let's just do what has to be done to get to the playoffs because
I'm with you, man.
This silliness that is coming over us with guys playing 40 minutes. I understand tonight was like an NBA Finals preview type of game. So I understand. I hope so too. And so I know Malone was kind of in that mindset as far as the chess match. But even beyond this game, this has still been a problem. And so Malone has to be honest with himself and say, look, I understand there are games where we got to go get that one. But outside of those games, man, just be real with yourself, man. Let your bench play, man. You've got to at some point maybe look down the bench and say you trust somebody, but you can't trust anybody if you don't put them in positions to be trusted.
Right. And you know what? Maybe that's a case of getting Dario Saric in there. I know it hasn't worked out, but you can't have Jokic playing 40 minutes a night in the regular season.
Just silly,
with
man.
3 games in 4 days also. The third game in 4 nights, too, by the way. Christian Brown playing 47. You did bring something interesting up there, and I've thought a little bit about this. Why is Nikola Jokic playing the entirety of the first quarter? Like, I would almost like to see him play, because you see a lot of other star players. They don't do that in the rotation. A lot of other star players will play, I don't know, the first 8 minutes of the first quarter, sit that 4 minutes, that last 4 minutes of the first quarter, and then come back in to start the second quarter. I would be curious to ask Malone about that. Like, have you ever considered changing up specifically Nikola Jokic's when he sits versus when he does not? Same thing in the third quarter. Plays the entirety of the third and then sits basically half of the fourth. Why not sit Joker, with 4 minutes to go in the first and third, and then have him start the second and the fourth? What do you think about that possibility?
Well, I would think that would be a great question to Coach Malone. And if you're asking me personally, I think you should start the next time they play, because I think it could benefit this team a lot. I think you pull Russ out at the same time as you pull Jokic out.
If he started, right?
If
Russ is starting. Okay.
And then from there, you just let Jamal just go, man. You just let Jamal go. And you just trust that the guys around them are in their dunker spots. They're rotating around on the 3-point line. They're screening when they need to be, so that Jamal can continue to be as aggressive as he needs to be. Kind of going back to what we talked about a few minutes ago, there has to be other things you got to try to get guys going sooner who are struggling early or who are not looking for their shot early. And so Malone can't wait, and his assistants have to be a little bit more proactive in saying, hey, if we get in this situation again here later in the game, this is what we need to go to, like, as soon as possible.
Yeah.
And I think it starts with at least playing around with the fact that Nikola doesn't have to play all of the first and third quarter. Stagger it a little bit better, man. And that way you can kind of see what bench players can feed off of Jokic's energy in the second quarter. That way, if he ends up having to go sit 2 more minutes in the second quarter before he comes back to walk them up to halftime, the momentum just doesn't just come to such a halt, or such an abrupt halt, that it almost feels like the momentum has to be it's like playing tug of war. Like, it's like you're trying to pull the momentum back to your side, and by the time you get to halftime, you're exhausted. And the Nuggets should be, they can't keep running into that same issue, man. So let's try this stuff now while we have 20 or so games left, so that way you can figure out, does it work?
Yeah. And go back to your point earlier, I asked you, with Michael and Jamal only taking one shot in the first quarter, who's that more on? The coaching staff, like maybe not drawing up plays to get them involved earlier on, or is on the players? Now that I think about it, like, you're right, man. That's on Jamal and Michael. They need to have a mindset earlier on in games to get going, because Jamal always seems to, like, get into that mode later on in the game. But especially against a team like the Celtics, the defending NBA champions, you can't have that mindset of like, well, we'll pick it up later on in the game. Jamal needs to have – I would love to see Jamal Murray attack the rim early on, like – his first 3 possessions, Jamal and Michael, by the way, just attack the rim. Try to draw a foul. Try to see the ball go through the hoop earlier on in games, because with what they're doing right now, that's not a recipe for success for this team. If Jamal gets going earlier on in this game, KJ, and plays like he did in the second half, the Nuggets will win this game. And Michael just didn't really get it going at all. Michael is such an X factor for this team. If he plays like he did tonight, or, really throughout this road trip, I don't think the Nuggets have a shot. But if we see the Michael Porter Jr. that we saw that in that 3-game stretch before the All-Star break, I absolutely think that pushes the Nuggets up into that top tier of title contenders. So, and with the caveat of Jamal being Jamal Murray, you know what I'm saying? They've got to figure out a way to get going earlier on in games. You can't have these scenarios where it's Nikola Jokic and maybe Russell Westbrook are the only two dudes going on early in games. It may be a little bit of Christian Brown, but those two guys specifically, man, they've got to figure out a way to get going on earlier in games. They just have to. And this has been a problem all year, KJ.
It really has, Dan. And here's the truth of the matter. We have two guys who believe that they can be the second scorer of this team. And I just think there are more times than not where Jokic is trying to figure out who does he need to get going sooner rather than later. The onus cannot always be on Jokic to get these guys going, man. Christian Brown.
Exactly. You can't have Nikola Jokic be the guy that determines who gets going earlier on in games.
No,
it's got to be on the individual players. And that's where I think Michael and Jamal really need to change their mindset to get going earlier on in these games. I do think it's vitally important. You cannot have those two guys taking one shot in the first quarter. I mean, think if that were to happen in a playoff game.
There's a greater chance that they get absolutely blasted if that happens in a playoff game, because the Celtics have become infamous for blowing leads because of how many threes they take. But say a disciplined team like Minnesota, who is more physical and they don't feel obligated to take a bunch of three-point shots, or OKC, or think of another team out west, or let's go with the Lakers, right? Because the
Lakers, yeah,
exactly. Those teams don't feel obligated to keep taking threes like the Celtics do. So their runs are a lot more sustainable through the course of an entire game. So if you don't have one of your other big guns going, there's not a chance that you will be able to overcome that blowout lead that you were experiencing in the first half. So if this was a playoff game, I mean, you'd have Malone, and I'm going to go back and listen to his presser. You'd probably have Malone absolutely just blowing a gasket, because he's going to just be trying to wreck his brain trying to figure out, why aren't my two stars being more aggressive? We know the defensive coverages are different. We know they're letting more calls go in the playoffs, but that doesn't mean you stop being aggressive.
By the way, did you see that picture of Nikola Jokic's arm? The blood just dripping down his tricep, KJ. Dude, he got 0 free throws.
That's
what I'm bleeding saying. All over the place. Like, look, I didn't think the refs were like horrendous in this game by any means, and I'm very anti-blame the ref guy. But my God, like, how is that even possible to have like bloody arms left and right, 0 free throws? And also, KJ, there's one more thing in today's game. If you hold Jason Tatum to 4 of 15 shooting from the field, 1 of 7 from beyond the arc, 16 points, you have to win that game.
Right.
You have to.
With no Drew Holiday or Kristaps Porzingis.
Didn't even mention that. One of the best perimeter defenders in the NBA, Drew Holiday. You got to win those games, man.
Yeah, dude. Man, I'm glad you're bringing this up. I gotta go look this up. I wish I would have did it before I came on. I gotta see the Nuggets record on national TV games this year, because it's dwindling at a fast rate here in 2025. Man, it is just, it's not good, and I don't understand why. Like, because it hasn't been a problem for the Nuggets the past 4 to 5 seasons. Like, the one thing we praised Jamal Murray for was he knew when an ESPN truck or when a TNT truck was outside, because he came ready to rock and roll. But lately, it's just kind of been like this whole humness where it's just like, oh, well, we'll be fine. We'll just get this game back.
And it seems like that's the motto of the team, right? Or the mindset of the team right now, in a way. I want to bring up this comment. I like this comment from Ken in Music. WTF happened to this team where key players rarely all show up to play. I agree. Like, when is the last game where the big guys all showed up to play? Like, when is a game where Michael, Jamal, and Jokic, could throw Gordon in there too, but he's been hurt so much this year, it's kind of hard to throw him in. But specifically those 3 guys, KJ, can you remember the last game where all 3 of them showed up to play and all had like prolific scoring nights? You know what I'm saying? Like, when's the last time we saw that?
In a game that mattered, it's been a long time. We probably may have to go back to the playoffs. I'm pretty sure you could find some random game in January that
Sure.
they probably went off. Sure, whatever. Nitpick if you choose. But a significant game where they were all on their game, man, I would probably say you got to go back to like the Lakers series.
Wow. Yeah, probably. All right, KJ, who do you think's the biggest threat right now in the West to prevent Denver from getting out of the Western Conference? To me, I said OKC earlier, but the more I think about this, I really do think it's the Lakers, as crazy as that sounds from where they were earlier on this year. I think it's the Lakers. I think OKC's right there. I think Houston and Memphis are just still too young. Like, I do like what they're building in both of those respective programs.
Mm-hmm.
I do think they're still a little bit too young and maybe a year or two away from being serious contenders to get out of the West. I do think it's the Lakers. Who do you think is the biggest threat right now?
Until otherwise, to me, it's still going to be the Minnesota Timberwolves.
Really?
Yes, I do. I am being serious.
They're the 9 seed.
Perfectly fine. If they run into Minnesota, it's going to be a problem. Dude, the Nuggets struggle with teams that get physical. Look at how the Knicks have treated the Nuggets the last couple of seasons.
Fair point.
Look at how Minnesota has treated the Nuggets outside of the championship run. It has just been troublesome for them when teams get physical. Houston, a young physical team, continues to give the Nuggets problems. Memphis gave the Nuggets problems earlier this year. So when it comes to young physical teams, teams that know their identity, the Nuggets just struggle. They just do. And so that's just the goddamn honest truth, man. It's going to be the Minnesota Timberwolves until it's not. So I got Minnesota 1, OKC 2, LA 3, Memphis 4.
Wow. Okay. It is pretty wild what Minnesota has done this year. Like, they're 3 games over 500. They're 32-29 on the season. But I do agree with you.
Well, the problem
is physicality. What's the problem with Minnesota?
They refuse to start Naz Reid and send Julius Randle to the bench. So
Naz Reid is a good player. He's a very good player.
He's a really good player. He's going to lead them in free agency this year, and they're going to get nothing for him.
I would love to see him donning a Denver Nuggets jersey, man.
I sure would, but
that's exactly the kind of guy they need.
What the Nuggets would have to give up to get him would be just. Ugh.
Okay, let me ask a more broad question to you. And if I see this comment in here, I will. Let's see here, because somebody in the chat was talking about. Here it is. Okay, what do you think about this, KJ? Steven Johnson says trade Murray, MPJ Gordon in the offseason and rebuild around Jokic for his second half of his career. Now, I call this the Tom Brady move, kind of like what the Patriots did. Tom Brady really won Super Bowls with completely different teams. And honestly, we're probably going to see that happen in Kansas City with the Chiefs as well. Let me ask a broader question in this sense. If the Nuggets falter in the playoffs again this year, okay, do you think this team needs to make serious changes to its roster with Jokic being the only one off the table? Do you think that would be something that the front office would seriously consider if they falter and fall short in the playoffs?
If they lose in the second round or sooner, I'm going to have to vote yes, because Jokic's championship window is too precious. They've got about 5 years left of realistic Jokic window. Dude, here's the reality.
Hopefully 5 years.
Right. Hopefully 5. Here's the reality of what we're dealing with here that nobody's talking about. If Jokic leaves from this window with only one championship, he'll be known as a top 15, top 20 greatest player of all time. It would be a disappointment.
It would be a disappointment. There's no doubt about it. And I've said the same thing with the Avs in the McKinnon-McCarr era. Look, they each have a title. I mean, and that's fantastic. And I get it. The Nuggets that had never won a title before that. But I'm with you, man. Like, if these players, the McKinnon and McCarr era for the Avalanche and the Jokic era, we can call it the Jokic-Murray era for the Nuggets, end in one title, I think it's a disappointment.
It's a huge disappointment, man. We're talking about the difference between Nikola being a top 20 greatest player versus a top 10 greatest player. I think that's what we're talking about here. And so I think you got to kind of look at it through those lens of Are we doing, again, it's the constant question we ask on Altitude Sports Radio 92.5 all the time. Are the Nuggets doing everything they can in their hearts to help Nikola Jokic get over the hump? And I don't want us to look back when this window is over and say, well, we thought we were doing all that we could. That's too late. I don't want to hear that. So I'm going to vote yes. I think you may need to shake some things up this offseason. I love Gordon. I love what he brings to the team. His three-point shooting has improved enough to where he's moving into that category of like, are you sure you want to trade him? But Jamal, man, like I think you showcase Jamal on the back half of the season. You hope and pray he have a great playoffs, and I think you got to trade him this offseason, man, because Jamal, because I just think what he can give you versus what he's giving you is starting to become 70-30. It's no longer 50-50.
Obviously, it all depends on what happens in the playoffs this year. But I'm with you, man. If they get knocked out in the second round or sooner, I think the front office needs to seriously consider this roster moving forward, because you cannot be paying dudes basically the max and have like Michael Porter Jr. It's so frustrating because you can see the talent. Yep. And he's got one of the prettiest jump shots in the NBA. He is one of the best three-point shooters in the league, okay? But the inconsistency just drives me mad. Now here's the question, and you kind of just alluded to this there. What is their value at this point? Like, what is Jamal Murray's value in a trade? What is Michael Porter Jr.'s value in a trade? What is Aaron Gordon's value in a trade? I mean, he's been hurt half the year. So, again, it all depends on what happens in the playoffs, and it all depends on how those three individuals perform specifically. But I'm with you, man. I think if the Nuggets falter in the playoffs this year, they need to really reevaluate this roster and consider making major changes. I do.
I agree 1,000%, man. Like for example, like if this guy wasn't as hurt as he has been this offseason, the perfect trade for the Nuggets, as far as Jamal is concerned, you go get DeJounte Murray and you go get Herb Jones. Or if they don't want to give up Herb Jones, they have another young wing that you can go get as well. That would be a perfect compliment. That way you can make MPJ your number 2 scorer, and DeJounte Murray, he is really, really good in clutch time. He doesn't turn the ball over as much. He doesn't assist as much as Jokic does, but he's just as much of a passer as he is a scorer. So like, you know how Jamal is more like 65-35 score to pass. Like DeJounte Murray's like really 50-50, and he believes that in his heart, and he competes on defense. He's a true two-way point guard. If he didn't get hurt as much, that would be the perfect trade. But I don't know what their value is, man. I don't know what their value is because they're splitting shots too much. They're splitting shots too much. So you're not dominant on offense like you should, and you're mediocre on defense. There's nothing we can do to up your value, man. So they're stuck between a rock and a hard place, the Nuggets. But look, just because you're stuck doesn't mean you stay still.
Right. And you know, part of trading, if they were, this is obviously, we're just talking hypotheticals here, but if they were to trade them, it's not necessarily just the value they would be getting back in return as far as players go, or maybe draft picks. But I think one of the biggest benefits to that, if they were to do that, is giving them much more flexibility with the salary cap. I mean, they are in salary cap hell right now.
They are.
Paying Zeke Naji hasn't worked out. Paying Michael Porter Jr. what they paid Michael Porter Jr. has not worked out to what I think they had hoped. I mean, I get it. Like, that's kind of the price that these players are going for. But I do think that would be something that would be super beneficial, KJ, to this team is just getting more flexibility in the salary cap to where they can go out and make moves at the trade deadline that they see fit that can help this team to the best of their abilities, help Nikola Jokic in this era. And right now, I mean, look at what we saw at the trade deadline this year. And a lot of people were getting on the Nuggets for not making moves. It's like, they can't. They're not in a position to be going out and making all these crazy moves because they just don't have the cap flexibility.
They don't, man. But I finally figured it out, Dan. I'm sitting here thinking, I finally figured it out. Here's why we've been having so much friction between Calvin Booth and Coach Michael Malone. It's because Calvin Booth has been consulting Sean Payton on how to get out of cap purgatory. And there's Malone who's like, man, you should be calling me. And Calvin Booth's like, well, I want to call Sean Payton. And Sean Payton's like, well, here's how you get into cap purgatory. And Calvin Booth is taking notes. And I'm just like, what are we doing?
I don't think Sean Payton's the guy to go to get out of salary cap hell. He literally quit New Orleans because he left them in such a disastrous cap hell. Sean Payton is the last guy I would go to as far as how to manage your cap correctly, okay? We'll see what he does with the Broncos. Hopefully George Payton is on top of that because you do not want Sean Payton running your salary cap. That is a disaster.
Jeez Louise.
Yeah.
That's the only sense I can make of where we are, man. It's got to be Sean Payton's gremlins in the system. But beyond that, in all seriousness, man, I don't know their value. So the truth of the matter is it's championship or bust this year. And
if not, they need to make changes. Is essentially what you're saying. Right?
They've got to, man. Like I know a few minutes ago I said second round exit or sooner they should make changes. I don't think the Western Conference Finals is good enough anymore, man. So
I agree.
I think it's either get to the finals. You got to get to the finals, or you got to make some changes.
Yeah.
I understand we don't want to be drastic, but I'll say this. I'll put this on your plate and I'll leave it here. 2016, 73-9, Golden State Warriors get to the NBA Finals. They blow a 3-1 lead. They blow it all up to get Kevin Durant. They win 2 more championships and they got to a third.
Yeah. And last thing here, my guy Matty B says the money part of this argument does not apply. It's monopoly paper. I couldn't disagree more. When I hear fans say when I hear fans say like, it's not your money, who cares? Well, I care because there's a salary cap. Now, if you're talking about Major League Baseball, that's a fair argument because there is no salary cap. But when I hear people say, it's not your money, who cares? Well, I care because there's a salary cap. Okay, and the salary cap is a restriction on teams. So the money absolutely matters. And it's not just monopoly money. It's real money because, like I said, there's a salary cap. Now, look, Adam Silver in the NBA didn't do the Nuggets any favors by implementing in the new CBA the first and second apron and everything else they added in. Of course, that's like right in the window where the Nuggets have a potential dynasty on their hands. They couldn't do it when the Lakers were having their dynasty or the Spurs or the Warriors. Right when the Nuggets get in their dynasty window, this happens. But the money absolutely matters because there's a salary cap. And if you need proof of that, look at what happened at the trade deadline. The Nuggets couldn't do anything because of the salary cap.
1,000%, Dan. I darn near could just leave it there. But if I were going to add anything, I would say that's the truth of the matter we're dealing with here. The salary cap situation for the Nuggets is so bad that they're in a position, I think, ultimately where the league wants them to be. They've got to trade a star player or stay put. And there's really no wiggle room because if there was, they would have found a way to find that out at the trade deadline. So listen, my man, I know you believe we're dealing with monopoly money here, but if the Nuggets don't get to the NBA Finals, you're going to find out just how real this quote-unquote monopoly money you think you're playing with is.
Yep. I couldn't have said it better. KJ, you're the best, man. Thanks for hopping on. And what you guys got going on the show tomorrow?
Man, appreciate you.
And congrats to Coach Sanford, new head coach at Valor. He's going to be the new head coach at and he's staying on the show. He's not going anywhere as far as Altitude Sports Radio goes. It was funny, KJ. Obviously I graduated from Columbine football powerhouse, if you didn't know. As Stanford was leaving the studio the other day after he got the job, it's like, hey man, congrats, and Columbine's gonna beat that ass.
Oh my God! So I'm glad you brought that up. That is going to be interesting on Mondays. How does he come in after those Friday night losses? Because God forbid something happens where he loses that Friday and the Broncos lose on a Sunday.
I'm rooting for Coach. I am, except for when they play Columbine.
Well,
but hey, in all seriousness, Valor got a great, not only a great coach, but a great person. Mike is awesome.
Absolutely.
And he is a football genius. I mean, I've had conversations with him about like the X's and O's. That dude is a freaking genius. And they got a really, really good coach in Mike Sanford. So that was great.
Yeah, no, I agree 1,000%, man. I co-sign everything you said. I think Valor Christian understands that. They understand that at the end of the day, if you got to win, you've got to raise the bar a little higher. And they did that in Coach Sanford. He's well-rounded. He's been a little here. He's been a little there. He has connections everywhere you can turn. And so for that, I think Valor Christian made the right hire, man. So kudos to them, man. Tomorrow's show, to answer your question formally, we'll be celebrating Coach Mike Sanford. And then we'll also be, kind of getting into some combined stuff and kind of walking everybody through where the Nuggets and Avs are right now as they're making a transition. As some of you guys know, and maybe some don't, the Avs made a trade this weekend. It's definitely shook up their bottom six pairing. So there's some work to do there. We've got to decide between now and Friday. Do they go and use these remaining assets to go and get a third D pair or whatever that needs to look like? So we'll reset that on Monday. We'll reset where the Nuggets are. Give you guys a chance to kind of get the full scope of where we are in Denver sports. So,
dude, the Avalanche, they are not afraid to make moves, are they, KJ? Holy cow. I mean, my goodness, last year they traded Byram for Middlestat. This year they trade Nico Rantanen. And that kind of goes back to our Nuggets conversation. The Avs aren't afraid to make moves. And the Avalanche, I think what their front office has done, and they've been so good at, is really kind of looking towards the future. And I think the Nuggets could take a little bit of a lesson from the Avalanche in that sense. So we'll see if that comes to fruition. But KJ, great stuff as always, man. Appreciate you jumping on the show.
Man, appreciate you having me, Dan, and look forward to jumping on later this week, brother. All
right, there he goes, our guy KJ Granderson. That's going to do it for the post-game show, everybody. Really appreciate you tuning in. A lot of good conversation there with our guy KJ. And, again, these are hypothetical talks about if the Nuggets falter in the playoffs, does this team need to make moves? I really do think so. My guy, Kevin, he does not want to trade Jamal Murray. And look, I get it. Like, they won a title with this guy. Last thing I'll address here before we get out of here. Then trade Najee and Saric. Don't mess with our star players. Kev, here's the problem, man. What are they going to get for Dario Saric and Zeke Najee that's going to really benefit this team? Nothing. I mean, their value couldn't be lower. Actually, Zeke's probably his value has gone up a touch, I would say, because his ability to defend. Dario Saric, you're not going to get anything for Dario Saric. So, look, I get it, but if the Nuggets do falter this year, I'm in the camp of they need to make some serious moves. But we'll see what happens. There's still a lot of games to go here in the regular season, and obviously the playoffs coming up here in a little over a month. Hopefully this is a conversation we don't even need to have. Maybe the Nuggets just blow up in the playoffs and go out and win another title. Who knows? But we'll save that conversation for another day. But that's going to do it for the post-game show. Really appreciate everybody chiming in. A lot of good conversation there in the chat. And we'll be back coming up on Wednesday for the Nuggets and the Sacramento Kings. This has been In the Paint right here on Altitude Sports Radio.